It was a bright Saturday afternoon, and the sun was shining down with a warmth that seemed to promise nothing but good things. I decided to surprise my wife Megan with her favorite latte from the cafe where we had shared so many happy moments together. As I walked in, the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, bringing a smile to my face. But that smile quickly faded as my eyes landed on a table in the corner. There she was, Megan, my wife of 10 years, sitting across from a man I immediately recognized, Liam, her ex-boyfriend. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them. They were leaning in close, talking in hushed tones. And then I saw it. Liam reached across the table and took Megan's hand in his. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked at him with an expression that made my stomach churn. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. The cozy, intimate scene before me was a stark contrast to the life we had built together. This was the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, the woman I had trusted with my heart. And now, here she was, with him. For a moment, I thought about storming over there, demanding an explanation. But something held me back. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was the fear of what I might hear if I confronted them. So I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching as my world began to crumble. After what felt like an eternity, Megan and Liam stood up to leave. I quickly turned away, pretending to examine the pastries in the display case. My mind was racing, my heart aching. What was going on? Why was she with him? I needed answers, but I wasn't sure I was ready to face the truth. As they walked out of the cafe, I caught a glimpse of their faces. Megan looked happy and relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Liam had a smug smile that made my blood boil. I clenched my fists, feeling a surge of anger mixed with a profound sense of betrayal. I waited a few minutes before leaving the cafe, trying to compose myself. When I finally stepped outside, the sun seemed a little less bright, the warmth a little less comforting. My mind was a whirlwind of questions and doubts. Was this a one-time meeting, or was there more to their relationship? How long had this been going on? As I walked back to my car, the latte I had bought for Megan growing cold in my hand, I knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The beginning of uncovering a betrayal that would change everything. The days following my discovery at the cafe were a blur of confusion and unease. My mind raced with countless questions, and every small detail of my life with Megan now seemed tinged with suspicion. I couldn't shake the image of her and Liam holding hands, her smile so radiant and carefree. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was a one-time thing. Maybe they had just run into each other by chance and decided to catch up. But the more I thought about it, the less plausible it seemed. The intimacy between them was unmistakable, and it gnawed at me relentlessly. One evening, as Megan and I sat on the couch watching TV, I couldn't help but notice how often she glanced at her phone. Her fingers danced across the screen with a frequency that set my nerves on edge. She was laughing at something, a private joke that I wasn't a part of. I shifted in my seat, the unease growing stronger. "Who are you texting?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Megan looked up, a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Oh, just a friend from work," she replied, quickly putting her phone down. "Nothing important." But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. The next morning, while Megan was in the shower, I found myself drawn to her phone. It was lying on the nightstand, innocuous yet heavy with the weight of my suspicions. I picked it up, my hands trembling slightly. I knew her passcode. Trust had once been the foundation of our relationship. As I unlocked the phone, my heart pounded in my chest. I scrolled through her messages, searching for any sign of Liam. My breath caught when I found a thread between them, filled with conversations that spanned back months. They were far from innocent. "Had a great time yesterday. Can't wait to see you again soon," read one message from Liam. "Me too. It was just like old times," Megan had replied, with a heart emoji that made my stomach turn. My hands clenched around the phone as I read through the exchanges. They had been meeting regularly, sharing moments and secrets that I was completely unaware of. The betrayal cut deep, and I felt a surge of anger mixed with overwhelming sadness. That evening, I confronted Megan. My heart ached as I tried to keep my voice steady. "Megan, we need to talk. I know about you and Liam." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I saw guilt flash across her face, but she quickly composed herself. What are you talking about, Charlie? There's nothing going on between us. I took a deep breath, trying to control the rising tide of emotions. I saw your messages. I saw you two together at the cafe. Megan's face paled and she looked away. Charlie, it's not what you think. We just reconnected. He's going through a tough time, and I was just trying to help. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. Megan, holding hands, secret meetings, the messages. It doesn't look like you're just helping a friend. She bit her lip, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm sorry, Charlie. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I was confused, and it just happened. I felt a hollow ache in my chest as her words sank in. How long has this been going on? Megan looked down, unable to meet my gaze. A little over a year. The weight of her confession hit me like a punch to the gut. Over a year of lies and deceit. I couldn't find the words to express the depth of my hurt. Instead, I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her tears and my shattered trust. As I sat in my car, staring blankly at the steering wheel, I knew that this was only the beginning of uncovering the full extent of her betrayal. The life I had known was crumbling around me, and I had no idea how to piece it back together. The detective's report had left me reeling. The betrayal was deeper and more complex than I could have imagined. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to come to terms with the information. Megan had been siphoning money and planning a future with Liam, but there were still so many questions. Who was Liam to her, really? How long had this been going on? One evening, unable to sleep, I decided to dig into Megan's past myself. I began by searching through old photo albums and boxes of keepsakes stored in our attic. I found a box labeled College Years and opened it, feeling a pang of nostalgia. Inside were photos, letters, and mementos from a time long before we met. As I sifted through the contents, a series of letters caught my eye. They were tied with a red ribbon addressed to Megan and signed by someone named Liam. I sat down and began reading the letters. They were love letters, filled with passionate declarations and dreams of a future together. The dates on the letters spanned several years, leading up to the time Megan and I had started dating. My heart sank as I realized that Liam was not just an old boyfriend. He had been a significant part of her life. The more I read, the clearer it became. Megan and Liam had never truly broken up. Their relationship had continued in some form, even after she and I got married. The letters spoke of secret meetings and promises to each other. It became painfully obvious that Megan had been cheating on me from the very beginning of our marriage. Feeling a mix of anger and sadness, I decided to confront Megan directly. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for breakfast. When she finally did, I could see the weariness in her eyes. The tension between us had been palpable since my initial confrontation. Megan, we need to talk, I said, my voice strained. She looked at me wary but resigned. What is it, Charlie? I pulled out the letters and placed them on the table. Who is Liam to you, really? Her eyes widened in shock and fear as she saw the letters. Charlie, where did you find those? It doesn't matter where I found them, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I need to know the truth. How long have you been seeing him? Megan looked down, unable to meet my gaze. Charlie, Liam and I have a history. We dated in college, and I never really got over him. And you've been seeing him this entire time? Even after we got married? I asked, my voice rising. Tears welled up in Megan's eyes. Yes, I'm so sorry, Charlie. I never meant for it to go this far, but I couldn't let him go. I felt a cold, hard knot in my stomach. So all this time, you were lying to me? Our whole marriage was built on lies? Megan shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, Charlie, I did love you. I still do. But Liam, he was always there in the back of my mind. I stood up, unable to bear looking at her any longer. You were planning to take my money and run away with him. How can you say you love me? Megan sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. Liam promised me a future, but I didn't want to hurt you. The weight of her betrayal was overwhelming. The woman I thought I knew, the life we had built together, was nothing but a facade. I turned away, my mind made up. I couldn't stay in this house with these memories and lies. I want a divorce, I said quietly. And I will fight to keep what's mine. You and Liam can have each other, but you won't have my money. As I walked out of the house, the pain of betrayal cut deep, but there was also a sense of clarity. The truth had come to light, and now it was time to start anew, free from deceit and manipulation. Megan's actions had shattered our past, but they would not dictate my future. Leaving the house that morning was both a relief and a heartbreak. As I drove aimlessly through the city, I knew I had to take immediate action to protect myself from Megan's financial schemes. Her betrayal had already cost me emotionally. I couldn't afford to let it ruin me financially as well. I pulled over at a quiet park, took out my phone, and called my lawyer, Mark. Mark was a friend from college, someone I trusted implicitly. He answered on the second ring. "Charlie, what's up? You sound off." "Mark, I need your help. It's Megan. She's been siphoning money from our accounts, and I need to secure my assets. I want to file for divorce." There was a pause on the other end. "Wow, that's heavy. All right, come to my office right now. We need to get ahead of this." I arrived at Mark's office half an hour later. His secretary ushered me in, and Mark greeted me with a firm handshake and a concerned look. "Sit down, Charlie. Tell me everything." I recounted the past few weeks, the discovery at the cafe, the detective's report, the letters from Liam. Mark listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. "All right, the first thing we need to do is separate your finances. I'll draft the paperwork to freeze any joint accounts and transfer your assets into separate ones. We'll also need to gather all evidence of her financial misconduct for the divorce proceedings." He paused, looking me in the eye. "This is going to be a tough battle, Charlie. Are you ready for it?" I nodded, determination hardening my resolve. "I have to be. I can't let her get away with this." Mark nodded and began typing on his computer. "First, let's transfer the bulk of your liquid assets into a new account. Do you have access to your online banking?" I handed him my laptop, and he quickly set up a new account, transferring the funds and ensuring Megan wouldn't have access. It felt like a small victory, a first step toward regaining control. Next, we'll need to inform the banks and credit card companies about the situation. They can flag any suspicious activity on your accounts. I spent the next few hours with Mark, calling banks, freezing accounts, and setting up fraud alerts. The administrative tasks were mundane, but each completed step gave me a sense of empowerment. I was taking action, reclaiming my life from the chaos Megan had created. Before I left, Mark handed me a folder. "This contains the preliminary divorce papers and a list of documents you'll need to gather. Tax returns, property deeds, anything that shows your financial history. We'll use this to build our case." I took the folder, feeling the weight of it both literally and figuratively. "Thanks, Mark. I appreciate everything you're doing." "We'll get through this, Charlie," he said, giving me a reassuring pat on the back. "Stay strong and keep me updated on any developments." As I drove home, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and grim determination. The house seemed emptier than ever, a stark reminder of the life I was about to leave behind. Megan was in the living room, her eyes red from crying. She looked up as I entered, but I didn't acknowledge her. I went straight to my office, locking the door behind me. I spent the next few hours gathering the documents Mark had requested, scanning them, and sending copies to his office. It was tedious work, but it kept my mind focused. By the time I finished, the sun had set, casting long shadows across the room. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my temples. The day had been a whirlwind of emotions and actions, but I felt a sense of accomplishment. I was taking control step by step and preparing for the battle ahead. As I finally lay down to sleep, I knew this was just the beginning. The divorce proceedings would be long and difficult, but I was ready to fight for what was mine. Megan and Liam had underestimated me, but they were about to learn that I wasn't someone to be trifled with. The next few days passed in a blur of legal paperwork and intense emotions. I had distanced myself from Megan as much as possible, staying in a hotel to avoid the painful interactions at home. But I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. There were too many unanswered questions, and I needed to confront her about the full extent of her deceit. One evening, I decided it was time. I returned to the house, my resolve steeled for the confrontation. Megan was in the kitchen, pretending to read a cookbook but clearly just trying to keep herself occupied. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and apprehension. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm but calm. She nodded, closing the book and sitting down at the kitchen table. I joined her, taking a deep breath before diving into the conversation. Megan, I've been doing some digging. I found your letters to Liam from college. It's clear to me now that your relationship with him never ended. You've been lying to me from the start. Her face went pale, and she looked down, unable to meet my gaze. Charlie, I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I replied, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. You've been betraying me for our entire marriage. How could you do that to me? Tears welled up in her eyes. I was confused, Charlie. Liam and I had a history, and when we reconnected, all those old feelings came back. I didn't know how to let go. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Why did you keep me in the dark and make me believe in a lie? I demanded, my frustration boiling over. Megan sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you, and I thought I could have both of you. I shook my head, unable to comprehend her reasoning. You were planning to take my money and run away with him. How could you think that was okay? She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. I didn't know what else to do. Liam convinced me that we could start a new life together. But I never stopped loving you, Charlie. Love? I scoffed. You call this love? You've been stealing from me, lying to me, and plotting behind my back. That's not love, Megan. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. Charlie, please, give me a chance to make things right. I'll do anything. I stood up, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. It's too late for that, Megan. I've already filed for divorce. I'm going to fight for everything I've earned, and you won't get a cent more than what you're entitled to. Her face crumpled, and she began to cry harder. Charlie, please don't do this. I don't have a choice, I said, my voice cold and resolute. You made your bed, Megan. Now you have to lie in it. I left the kitchen, her sobs echoing in my ears. As I walked out of the house, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The confrontation had been painful, but it was also necessary. I had faced Megan's lies head-on and declared my intent to move forward without her. The drive back to the hotel was quiet, the city lights blurring past me. I thought about the years I had spent with Megan, the memories we had made, and the future I had envisioned. All of it was tainted now, overshadowed by her betrayal. But I was determined to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and emerge stronger from this ordeal. As I entered my hotel room, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle was far from over, but I was ready for it. Megan had underestimated me, but I would show her that I was not a man to be trifled with. I would protect what was mine and build a future free from deceit and betrayal. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional turmoil. As much as I wanted to distance myself from Megan, our lives were still intertwined by the legalities of our marriage. The divorce process was grueling, and Megan made it clear from the start that she wasn't going to give up without a fight. I spent countless hours in my lawyer Mark's office, going over every detail of our financial history. We scrutinized bank statements, property deeds, and investment portfolios. Mark was thorough, leaving no stone unturned in his quest to protect my assets. Megan's lawyer is going to argue that she's entitled to half of everything, Mark warned me during one of our meetings. But we have evidence of her financial misconduct, and we'll use that to our advantage. The first court hearing was a tense affair. Megan sat on one side of the courtroom, flanked by her lawyer, while I sat on the other with Mark by my side. The judge, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes, reviewed the preliminary documents before looking up at us. Mr. Williams, Mrs. Williams, I understand this is a contested divorce with significant financial implications. We will proceed with a thorough examination of your assets and liabilities. I expect full cooperation from both parties. Megan's lawyer, a slick, confident man named David, stood up. Your Honor, my client seeks an equitable distribution of the marital assets. She has been a dedicated wife and partner throughout their marriage, and she deserves her fair share. Mark rose to respond. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Williams has been diverting funds from the marital accounts for personal use, and we believe this should be taken into consideration when dividing the assets. The judge nodded. Very well. We will review all evidence in due course. This court is adjourned until the next hearing. As we left the courtroom, Mark turned to me. We have a strong case, Charlie. Don't lose hope. We'll fight this all the way. The following weeks were a blur of depositions, document reviews, and tense negotiations. Megan and I barely spoke, communicating only through our lawyers. The house we had shared felt like a battleground, each room a reminder of our broken promises. One evening, Mark called me with an update. "Charlie, we've uncovered more financial irregularities. It appears Megan was funneling money into an offshore account. This strengthens our case considerably." I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. She was planning to run away with my money. I can't believe this. "We'll use this evidence to argue for a larger share of the assets," Mark assured me. "But be prepared for a tough fight. Megan isn't backing down." The next hearing was a pivotal moment. Mark presented the new evidence, laying out a detailed account of Megan's financial deception. The judge listened carefully, her expression growing increasingly stern. "Mrs. Williams, can you explain these transactions?" she asked, looking directly at Megan. Megan's face was pale and she stammered. I made some mistakes, but I deserve my share of the assets. I've put in years of my life into this marriage." David, her lawyer, tried to mitigate the damage. "Your Honor, while my client acknowledges these actions, she was under significant emotional distress. We request a fair and equitable distribution regardless." The judge took a deep breath, clearly weighing the evidence. "Mr. Williams, Mrs. Williams, this is a complex case with significant implications. I will review all materials thoroughly before making a decision." As the proceedings continued, it became clear that Megan was fighting for every penny. She argued that she deserved half of everything: our home, our investments, even my business. The stress was overwhelming, but I remained determined to protect what I had worked so hard to build. Finally, after months of back and forth, the judge called us back to court for her decision. The atmosphere was tense as we waited for her to speak. After reviewing all evidence, it is clear that Mrs. Williams engaged in financial misconduct that significantly impacted the marital estate. Therefore, I have decided to award Mr. Williams a larger share of the assets. Mrs. Williams will receive a portion, but it will be adjusted to account for her actions. Megan looked devastated, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But I reminded myself of the betrayal, the lies, and the deceit. This was the just outcome. As we left the courtroom, Mark clapped me on the back. "We did it, Charlie. You're going to come out of this stronger." I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The battle was over, but the wounds would take time to heal. I was ready to move forward, leaving Megan and the past behind, and rebuild my life on my own terms. The judge's decision marked the end of the legal battle, but the emotional fallout was far from over. As I left the courthouse, the reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. The woman I had loved and trusted had betrayed me in the most profound way, and now I had to navigate a new life without her. Back at the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the divorce decree. The victory felt hollow. Yes, I had protected my assets, but the scars of Megan's betrayal ran deep. I needed to process everything that had happened, to find a way to move on. The next few weeks were a blur. I threw myself into my work, trying to distract myself from the pain. But no matter how busy I kept, the thoughts of Megan and Liam haunted me. I wondered if they were together now, living out the future they had planned with my money. It was a bitter pill to swallow. One evening, unable to sleep, I decided to take a walk around the city. The streets were quiet, the city lights casting a soft glow. As I walked, I thought about the life I had built with Megan and how it had all come crashing down. I realized that, despite everything, I still had a future ahead of me. I had to find a way to heal and rebuild. I reached out to friends and family, leaning on them for support. Their kindness and understanding were a balm to my wounded heart. They reminded me that I was not alone and that I had people who cared about me and wanted to see me thrive. One day I received a call from Megan. I hesitated before answering, unsure of what she could possibly want to say. But I knew I needed closure. "Charlie, it's Megan," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I know I hurt you deeply, and I regret it all." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Megan, your apologies don't change what happened. You betrayed me and lied to me, but I appreciate you acknowledging it." There was a long silence on the other end before she spoke again. "I understand. I just wanted to let you know that I'm moving to a different city with Liam. We're starting over." The words stung, but I was not surprised. "I wish you the best, Megan. I hope you find what you're looking for." As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of relief. The chapter with Megan was finally closing, and I could start focusing on my own healing. I decided to see a therapist, someone who could help me work through the pain and anger. Talking to a professional gave me new insights and tools to cope with my emotions. I also took up new hobbies, things I had always wanted to try but never had the time for. I joined a local hiking group, rediscovering the beauty of nature and the joy of physical activity. I started cooking classes, finding solace in the creativity of preparing meals. These activities became my therapy, helping me to rebuild my sense of self and regain my confidence. Slowly but surely, I began to feel more like myself again. The pain of Megan's betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was reclaiming my life, one step at a time. One evening, after a long hike with my new friends, I sat on a hill overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the landscape. As I watched the sky change colors, I realized that I was no longer haunted by thoughts of Megan and Liam. I was at peace with the past, ready to embrace the future. At that moment, I felt a profound sense of happiness. It was a happiness born not from external circumstances, but from within. I had faced betrayal and heartbreak, but I had come out stronger. I was ready to live my life to the fullest, with hope and optimism for the future. I never thought I would feel this way again, but here I was, happier than I had been in years. The initial sense of relief following the divorce and the conversation with Megan gradually gave way to a heavy, oppressive weight. Each day felt like a struggle, and no matter how hard I tried to focus on my new hobbies or lean on friends and family, the pain persisted. It became harder to get out of bed in the morning, and my thoughts grew darker with each passing day. I found myself replaying the events of the past year over and over in my mind. The betrayal, the lies, the endless court battles. Each memory was a dagger twisting in my heart. I started losing interest in the activities that once brought me joy. Hiking, cooking, and even spending time with friends felt like chores rather than escapes. One particularly bleak morning, I realized I couldn't continue like this. I hadn't been sleeping well, my appetite had disappeared, and I was constantly exhausted. The thoughts of Megan and Liam haunted me day and night, leaving me in a perpetual state of anguish. It was clear that I needed help. With a sense of desperation, I made an appointment with my primary care physician, Dr. Stevens. Sitting in the sterile, impersonal waiting room, I felt a mixture of shame and relief. Admitting I needed help was hard, but I couldn't deny that something had to change. "Charlie, come on in," Dr. Stevens called, a look of concern on his face as he saw me. "What brings you here today?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Doc, I'm not doing well. Ever since the divorce, I've been struggling. I can't sleep, I can't eat, and I can't stop thinking about what happened. I think I'm depressed." Dr. Stevens nodded, his expression empathetic. "Thank you for being honest, Charlie. Depression after a traumatic event like a divorce is not uncommon. It's good that you're seeking help." He asked me a series of questions about my symptoms, my daily routine, and my thoughts. It felt like a weight was lifting off my shoulders just to speak about my struggles openly. Dr. Stevens listened intently, jotting down notes. "Based on what you've told me, it sounds like you're experiencing major depressive disorder. I'm going to recommend a combination of therapy and medication. Therapy will help you work through your emotions and develop coping strategies, and medication can help regulate your mood." I felt a glimmer of hope. "Okay, I'm willing to try anything. I can't keep living like this." Dr. Stevens wrote a prescription for an antidepressant and referred me to a therapist, Dr. Clark, who specialized in helping individuals navigate life transitions and trauma. He explained the importance of giving the medication time to work and encouraged me to be patient with the process. A week later, I found myself in Dr. Clark's office. The room was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the clinical atmosphere of Dr. Stevens' office. Dr. Clark, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, welcomed me. "Charlie, it's nice to meet you. I understand you've been going through a tough time." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Yeah, it's been really hard. I feel like I'm stuck in this dark place and I don't know how to get out." Dr. Clark leaned forward, her eyes full of compassion. "It's okay to feel that way. We're going to work together to help you navigate this. Can you tell me more about what's been going on?" As I began to share my story, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. Talking about the betrayal, the court battles, and the overwhelming sense of loss was painful, but it was also cathartic. Dr. Clark listened without judgment, offering insights and asking questions that made me think more deeply about my feelings and reactions. Over the next few months, therapy became a lifeline. Dr. Clark helped me understand the depths of my pain and provided me with tools to manage my depression. We worked on mindfulness exercises, cognitive behavioral techniques, and strategies to rebuild my sense of self-worth. She encouraged me to reconnect with activities that once brought me joy, even if they felt like a burden at first. The medication, too, began to take effect, slowly lifting the fog of despair. I started to sleep better, my appetite returned, and the relentless negative thoughts began to subside. It wasn't a quick fix, but a gradual process of healing. One day, after a particularly insightful session with Dr. Clark, I went for a hike. As I reached the summit, I paused to take in the view. The city below, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, seemed to symbolize hope and new beginnings. I realized that while the journey was far from over, I was finally on a path toward recovery. Looking out over the horizon, I felt a sense of peace. I was grateful for the support of Dr. Stevens and Dr. Clark, and for the friends and family who had stood by me. Most importantly, I was beginning to feel grateful for the resilience I had discovered within myself. The darkness was lifting, and for the first time in a long while, I believed that I could find happiness again. As the months passed, the dark cloud of depression began to lift, and I started to feel more like myself again. Therapy with Dr. Clark was a crucial part of my recovery, and the medication helped stabilize my mood. But I knew that for true healing, I needed to find a new purpose, something to channel my energy into and rebuild my life around. One afternoon, after a particularly reflective therapy session, Dr. Clark suggested I consider volunteering. Helping others can be incredibly therapeutic, she said. It gives you a sense of purpose and can help put your own struggles into perspective. I decided to take her advice. I began researching local organizations and soon found one that resonated with me. A community center that offered support to people going through difficult life transitions, much like I had experienced. The center provided everything from counseling and job placement services to workshops on financial management and wellness. Walking into the community center for the first time, I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The building was a bustling hub of activity, filled with people from all walks of life. I introduced myself to the volunteer coordinator, Maria, a warm and welcoming woman who immediately made me feel at ease. "Charlie, we're so glad to have you here," Maria said, handing me a volunteer handbook. "There are many ways you can help. What kind of work interests you?" I thought for a moment. "I'd like to be involved in the support groups," I said. "I think sharing my experience and listening to others could be really beneficial." Maria nodded. "That sounds perfect. We have a group meeting this evening. Why don't you join us and see how it goes?" That evening, I sat in a circle of people, each with their own story of loss, betrayal, or hardship. As they spoke, I felt a deep connection to their pain. When it was my turn to share, I hesitated at first, but then the words started to flow. I talked about my marriage, the betrayal, the divorce, and the depression that followed. It was cathartic, and for the first time in a long while, I felt understood. Over the next few weeks, I became a regular in the support group. Listening to others and offering my own insights helped me heal in ways I hadn't anticipated. I realized that my experience, painful as it was, had given me a unique perspective and the ability to empathize deeply with others. One evening, after a particularly powerful group session, a young woman named Rachel approached me. "Charlie, I just wanted to thank you," she said. "Hearing your story and how you've managed to start rebuilding your life has given me hope." Her words touched me deeply. "Thank you, Rachel. I'm glad my story could help. We're all in this together, and we'll all find our way through." As the months went by, my involvement at the community center grew. I started leading some of the support group sessions and even organized a few workshops on resilience and rebuilding after trauma. It gave me a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment that I hadn't felt in years. Outside of the community center, I continued to rebuild my personal life. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I started dating again, taking things slow and focusing on building healthy, honest relationships. Each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. One sunny afternoon, I decided to visit my favorite hiking trail. As I climbed the familiar path, I reflected on the journey I had been on. The man who stood at the summit today was very different from the one who had started this hike months ago. I had faced my darkest fears, confronted my pain, and come out stronger. At the top, I sat down to take in the view. The city below was bustling with life, and the mountains in the distance stood tall and resilient. I realized that, like the mountains, I had weathered the storm and emerged more steadfast and grounded. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. Life had thrown me some of its hardest challenges, but I had found my way through. I had rediscovered my purpose, and with it, a new sense of happiness and fulfillment. I never thought I would feel this way again, but here I was, on top of the world, ready to embrace whatever the future held. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly happy and hopeful, and I knew that this was just the beginning of a beautiful new chapter in my life. As the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the incredible journey I had been through. The pain, betrayal, and heartbreak had once seemed insurmountable, but with each passing day, I grew stronger and more resilient. It was a testament to the power of healing and the human spirit's capacity for renewal. One evening, as I sat by the fireplace in my new home, I thought about the transformation I had undergone. The house was smaller than the one Megan and I had shared, but it felt more like home. It was filled with items that represented my journey: books on personal growth, framed photographs from my hikes, and mementos from the community center. I had also adopted a dog, a playful golden retriever named Max. He had become my loyal companion, bringing joy and laughter into my life. His presence was a reminder that love and companionship could be found in unexpected places. My phone buzzed with a message from Agnes, a woman I had been dating for a few months. She was kind and understanding and had a way of making me feel valued and appreciated. It was still early days, but I felt optimistic about our future. "How about a hike this weekend?" her message read. I smiled, typing back a quick response. "Sounds perfect, can't wait." As I put down the phone, I thought about the support group at the community center. Over time, I had built deep connections with many of the members. We shared our stories, supported each other through tough times, and celebrated each other's victories. It was a community built on trust and mutual respect, and it had become an integral part of my life. On New Year's Eve, I hosted a small gathering at my house. Friends from the community center, a few old friends, and Agnes all came together to celebrate the end of a tumultuous year and the beginning of a new one. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of good company. As midnight approached, we gathered around the fireplace, glasses of champagne in hand. The clock struck 12, and we toasted to new beginnings. "To resilience, growth, and happiness," I said, raising my glass. "And to all the people who helped me get here." Cheers erupted, and I felt a sense of fulfillment wash over me. This was what life was about: embracing change, finding strength in adversity, and cherishing the moments of joy and connection. After the guests had left and the house was quiet, I sat by the fireplace with Max at my feet. I thought about Megan and the journey that had brought me here. I had learned to forgive, not just her, but also myself. Forgiveness was a crucial part of my healing, allowing me to let go of the past and embrace the future. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but I felt equipped to handle them. I had built a new life, one that was authentic and true to who I was. The pain of the past had shaped me, but it did not define me. Instead, it had become a part of the rich tapestry of my life, adding depth and resilience. As I looked into the flickering flames, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had come a long way from the man who had discovered his wife's betrayal in that restaurant. I had navigated the depths of despair, found strength in the support of others, and emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. I never thought I would feel this way again, but here I was, happier than I had been in years. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. This was a new beginning, and I was excited to see where it would lead. With a contented sigh, I stood up and headed to bed, Max following close behind. As I lay down, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey, the lessons learned, and the promise of a new day. Life was a beautiful, unpredictable adventure, and I was ready for whatever came next.